Do we really need to be pruning our tomatoes? Or are we just overcomplicating things? Hi, and welcome back to The Provident Gardener. I'm Amanda, mom of 6, and backyard gardener, learning right along with you. In this video, we're diving into what might be one of the biggest debates out there: pruning your tomatoes. For years, I've heard from dozens of gardeners different tips and tricks to pruning your tomatoes and how necessary it is. But will they thrive even if you don't prune them? Today, I'm going to show you what things have looked like for us this year, the research and advice I tried to follow, what I didn't keep up with, and how things are looking now. Let's go back 2 months. So let's start with the big question. Do you have to prune your tomato plants? Well, the short answer is it depends on what kind of tomatoes you're growing and what your goals are. Now, there are two main types of tomato plants: indeterminate and determinate. An indeterminate tomato plant will keep growing up and up and up and continue producing fruit all season long until a disease, a pest, or a freeze kills it. Determinate tomato plants, on the other hand, they're shorter, they're bushier, they're not vining as much as these indeterminate ones are. And they put on one big flush of fruit and then will typically die off. Now, I personally have never seen that because I have such a short growing season here that a freeze comes and kills it before it gets through that whole flush of fruit. But they still need to be pruned and taken care of. For indeterminate tomatoes, pruning is super helpful. I typically remove all the lower leaves for airflow, pinch off the suckers, or cut them off in my case when I've let them get too big. Now, if you don't know what a sucker is, it's a shoot that grows up between the main stem and a branch. You'll have a little sucker that comes up in between there. And those turn into another main stem, essentially. It's like a whole nother tomato plant that will grow and produce fruit. Doing these things helps the plant to put more energy into producing fruit and not just foliage. Now, as you can see here, I've let mine get a little bit out of control, and we have a lot of pruning to do. Pruning your tomato plants, it helps with airflow, which helps your fruit to be healthier and ripen better, and it makes your plants a lot more manageable in a small space, especially when you fit a lot of plants into that small space. Now, in past years, I've tried to keep up on pruning my tomato plants, cutting off the suckers, but still leaving a lot of green. And as we get further into the season and, life is busy, I kind of don't keep up on it as much. Things get a little wild, but I still get a good crop of tomatoes. But I haven't had that this year. I haven't kept up on my pruning. I haven't been as severe with it. And these plants are beautiful and healthy. I mean, look how big and lush and green they are. But they're not getting a lot of tomatoes or even flowers. And so I've had to do some research to find out what's going on and how I can fix it. One of the things I discovered could be a problem is our temperatures. It gets hot here, and we've been hitting 90 plus for several days in the last month. And that could be affecting development of flowers on my plants and even causing the ones that do develop to drop. A way you can fix that is shade cloth. It'll help shade them from the severe sun in the afternoon. It can be a little tedious because you're going to be wanting to put it on in the hottest part of the day and then take it off. But if you're getting your tomatoes, it'll be worth it. Now, another thing that could be causing the problem is too much nitrogen. Nitrogen is essential for tomatoes. It helps with their growth. It helps support the plant through the whole growing process. But if you have too much nitrogen, they can get stuck in this growth phase where they're just constantly saying, I need to put on more green, more growth. And as a result, they're not putting on tomatoes. Now, without a soil test, you can't definitively know how much nitrogen you have. So it's kind of a guessing game. But I came across an idea in my research that really made sense to me, and I'm going to try it out. A plant's whole purpose is to grow and produce so that it survives. But when it is so healthy like this, it has so much green, it's doing so well, it's beautiful, it doesn't really feel that stress to need to produce fruit, to produce seed to survive. The idea was that if you prune it more severely, it'll put the plant under a little bit more stress. So it's going to say, oh, I've got to put on more fruit so that I can produce seed to survive and to carry on my plant legacy. So if too much nitrogen is my problem, I'm hoping this might help. Hopefully they'll start putting on more flowers and giving us more tomatoes. That's what gardening is all about. When you have a problem, you do your research, you do some trial and error, and you try to find out what works for you. It's tedious and it can take a lot of time and be frustrating, but it's worth it when you get the harvest of your hard work. Now I'm about to do a really heavy pruning on these plants. I've let them go a little too long without my regular pruning. I'll probably do it over the course of 2 days because I want to put them under a little bit of stress, but I don't want to stress them out too much. Now growing determinate tomatoes and pruning them is a little bit different. The only determinates I usually grow are these Romas here. And as I said, they're short, they're bushy. So you don't want to be pruning off the suckers because of that one big flush of fruit that I mentioned that they put on. You want as much production as possible within this small, short, bushy plant. So we don't prune the suckers, but we still trim up the bottom, cut off any leaves that are making it too crowded because we want good airflow. So I don't prune my determinate tomato plants as much as I do my indeterminate because they need all this foliage, all those suckers to help produce one really big flush of fruit. So yes, you do prune a determinate tomato plant, just differently and not as much. You just want to keep it cleaned up to prevent disease and keep good airflow. Now it's time to prune. A few tools that I use are, of course, pruners, gloves if you don't want your hands turning brown and green, and isopropyl alcohol. I spray my pruners with this in between each plant so that if one plant does have a disease, I'm not spreading it to the next one. So as you can see here, I've given my tomato plants a pretty good haircut. I cut off everything from the bottom, really thinned them out. And as I was doing this, I realized another reason why my tomatoes might not be doing well. And it actually has nothing to do with my tomatoes and everything to do with me. I might just be a little impatient. It may just not be time for them to be putting on a lot of fruit yet. I looked at pictures from our garden a few years ago and noticed they were about at this same stage this same time of year. Sometimes we can get caught up in comparison when we see videos and pictures from other people's gardens. But we have to remember we all have different gardens in different areas. And so what may be happening in one person's garden isn't going to work for our garden. Our garden will bloom and flourish when it's ready. Okay, now here we are in the middle of September, and I just harvested this from my garden this morning. A lot of those tips and tricks we just went over, I used and I tried in the beginning, but life gets busy. This happens to me every year. I have good intentions of keeping up on my pruning, and then I don't. And guess what? My tomato plants still thrive. They still produce a ton of tomatoes. So maybe tomato pruning isn't the make it or break it hack it's always made out to be. Now, I do think some of the initial pruning probably was a good thing, but I haven't pruned this in a couple of months. Now, I want to make sure I point out probably the two things I do think are important when it comes to pruning and that I will still do and I kind of need to catch up on. And that is one, pruning up from the bottom so you don't have leaves hanging down. That makes your plant more susceptible to diseases and things coming up from the soil. Now, I haven't done that, and a lot of my leaves around the bottom of my plants are not looking good, but they're still thriving. So maybe you don't do it and things are still good. The second thing I still think is really important when it comes to pruning is for airflow. Sometimes these plants just get really big and bushy and full. Airflow is good and healthy for plants. So I'll go in and cut out some of these branches to loosen things up a little bit and provide some more room. So many factors go into whether or not you have healthy plants, from soil, nutrients in the soil. Maybe you're feeding your plant extra nutrients, sunlight, watering, so many factors. Ultimately, it's about finding out what works for you. The best way to learn about gardening is to do it. Try different things, and you're going to find the formula that is just right for you and your garden. And in this case, with tomatoes, maybe it means less stress, less maintenance, and still amazing results. Now, I do think it's important to point out one downside of letting your tomatoes just go free like this. And that is harvesting is a lot harder. You really have to dig and pull apart these branches to get to your tomatoes. And the plants kind of just become one big conglomerate. If I were to go in now to some of my plants and try to separate them and pull them apart, I would probably have branches that broke. But I don't mind a little extra work to get a bowl full of tomatoes. I would love to hear from you. Have you been pruning your tomatoes this summer? Let me know in the comments down below. And never be afraid to get a little dirt under your fingernails so you can turn that dirt into dinner for you and your family. Thanks for joining me in my garden today.